Okay. Now, what happens if I cut my waist knot too soon, or I cut my knot without my thread actually being anchored? So I'm gonna go into the canvas in the front. There's my knot. I'm gonna go over several stitches. I'm gonna start stitching. Now I'm going to intentionally make sure that I do not stitch over the thread in the back. Most likely, if this is a problem that you face, it won't be that you missed the entire thread. It might be that you missed 1 or 2 stitches. If you have a good 4 stitches in, I wouldn't worry about it. If you miss all of the stitches, or if you have 3 or 4 stitches, more than 2 stitches really, in a row that you didn't cover the thread, I would say go back and address it. And that's what we're gonna do here. There's probably many options, but we're gonna go over 2 options. So, we are stitching. For the purpose of demonstration, I'm actually holding the fiber away so I don't stitch it and anchor it. And say we get to right here. We think we're great, we think we're done, and we think it's time to cut our waist knot. So I cut my waist knot. And then I realize from the back of my canvas that that thread is actually not anchored in, which means I could start losing stitches. So this is where my thread is. This is where my thread is now. This is my last stitch. This is my first stitch. And I could really just go in there and get it out. So we can lose stitches, they can come undone. So you have 2 main options at this point. You've only stitched a couple of stitches. In a real scenario, I would say you've stitched a couple of stitches, you missed anchoring, take these 6 stitches out and start again. Not a big deal, you haven't missed much. Say we don't want to do that for whatever reason, and you need to anchor this stitch in. We're gonna do a unorthodox thing, and we're just gonna anchor this in the back. So I'm holding down, this was the tail end that didn't get anchored. I'm gonna hold it over my stitches where it should have been anchored, and I'm gonna start kind of sewing it in there a little bit. So I'm gonna start by holding it down and then taking my needle. And this is actually harder to do with it on the frame. And threading it under. And kind of catching that thread. Now, I think you need more than 1. So I would go back, I'd want it to get under a couple more different stitches. And almost like you're burying your stitches at the end, or burying your needle to anchor when you're done. We're gonna do that and make sure we've really got this in good. Now you can even see it's still a little bit loose. You can also see it's starting to look a little bit sloppy. Not the end of the world. It's a little harder on a frame. Not the end of the world that it's looking sloppy, but we don't want to lose any of our stitches. So I'm going to keep going over And you can see by this process, this is very doable. But probably would have been easier just to start over. Because if you lose a thread while you're anchoring it, you really have only gone a handful of stitches. So it shouldn't be that big a deal. I apologize for the camera angles. This was a toughie to get filmed properly. Okay, so now we're messy, but we're anchored. This isn't going anywhere. And you can keep on stitching.